A big part of it is just, as a salesperson, embodying honesty, integrity, and transparency. And that can be your own personal sort of morals and moral compass, if you will, but trying to look at it as, treating that person as you would want to be treated.
So you mentioned Amicus Buyers Group. Maybe you could explain what that is and how people can join the group.
Yeah, I can explain what I know of the Amicus Buyers Group, but they're basically a cooperative. They're a consortium of value-based clean energy companies that pool their resources.
There's this whole other world of like the solar salespeople, and they have their own conference. And it's like completely separate from what we do. And I guess there's this conference called SolarCon.
Hello, and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
On this podcast, we have a special treat. This is a very important subject. We're going to talk about some unethical solar sales practices and how to take this one class that will change your whole life, especially if you are an unethical solar salespeople. And I hope I have a whole bunch of unethical solar salespeople listening, to this podcast. That would be pretty cool, because then just in one swoop, we listen to this podcast and everybody takes Rob Mueller's class on HeatSpring, and it's just about an hour or two, and it is about ethical solar sales. So thanks for talking to me, Rob. How's it going over there in Maine? We have this country surrounded, you and me.
It's going really well. Thanks, Sean, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here on the podcast and talk about ethics in solar sales today.
Yep. And were you at the NABCEP conference by any chance?
I've never been to the NABCEP conference.
Okay.
I've been wanting to go, but it just hasn't fit into the schedule yet.
Yeah, because at the NABCEP conference, the keynote speaker was Senator Donate. I wonder if that's why he got elected. He was this young guy. I'm saying donate. It's spelled like donate it, but it's donate. But it's a good way to raise money, I guess. And his thing that he's been doing and talking about is, bringing ethics into solar sales. And I think that there's been a lot of bad press about solar sales. And, I see it on like the Reddit for solar, and I feel really bad for these people. And the senator had his parents get conned. And then he had, some constituents get conned. And we're going to stop that right now. Thanks to you, Rob.
It is going to take a full court press from the industry to sort of turn us around. We have some things happening from a select few bad actors that, I think that there's some governing bodies, some associations, as well as a lot of boots on the ground who are saying, this isn't us and we can do better. And that was where this ethics in solar sales course spawned out of. Was, I believe it was NABCEP approached HeatSpring and said, hey, we would love for a course on, ethics as it relates to sales. And, you can be unethical in a lot of sales roles, but unfortunately it's hit the solar industry quite hard. And a lot of that makes the press, and a lot of people have felt the hurt. So, Britt Heller, who we worked with over at
she's
HeatSpring,
great. Yeah.
Isn't she? Yeah, it was fantastic. It was a pleasure working with her, and approached our team at the Revision Energy Training Center and said, hey, you've got a great reputation for value-based sales, and would you be willing to help us develop this course? And there was a few months lag. We had some new team members come on. Like, I've only been with Revision Energy since May of last year, and I was hired as an apprenticeship coordinator, and I run our technical sales apprenticeship program and our customer service apprenticeship program. So I helped get those off the ground. We recently launched our first cohorts of both of those apprenticeship programs. And then I also jumped into this ethics and solar sales course.
Great. Well, that's pretty cool. And so, by the way, just for people that want to just go and jump into the class, it's really important. It's more important than even listening to this podcast. Go to the show notes, and we will have a link right at the top of the show notes on how to sign up for your class. And the name of the class is Introduction to Ethics in Solar Sales. And it looks like it has a lot of good modules in there and different videos and things like that. I'm going to read off some of them just in the main part of the class. Fundamentals of ethical sales practices, navigating complex policy, driving business through an adherence to values, incentivizing and measuring ethical sales, common pitfalls in solar sales, ethics in practice, and ethics in practice scenarios. And then right here at the last one in this module, that's the main module of the course, is implementing ethics in daily sales practices. So this senator came on at the NABCEP conference. He was pretty much the keynote speaker. And I remember too, like all the people running NABCEP, it was like right after a meet and greet. And so it was hard to get everybody in there. And so Sean O'Brien from NABCEP was like walking through, and he was just like pretty much pushing the crowd into this room. So it was a pretty packed room. And it was really good. It was one of the best presentations. This guy's like really young. I mean, to me, it looks like he just got out of high school or something. And I'm sure he's not old enough to be president. And he's a Las Vegas senator, where they probably have a little bit of way of a problem with ethics over there, I would think, traditionally. and he's going after him. And there's like magazine articles written about him that he's helped with. And he was calling the people that were like the unethical salespeople solar bros. And so I've been using that term ever since, talking about solar bros. And I've seen a lot of my friends on LinkedIn that were at that conference too, pointing out the solar bros. And one way that I like using comedy is when you make fun of something like that, then people are embarrassed to be unethical solar bros. And so we could just make fun of them. So let's just make lots of jokes and embarrass these guys. And then another thing that I've kind of noticed too is that I think there's been some extra salespeople signing up for my classes. And, like trying to get NABCEP certified and stuff. Maybe they took your class first, even something like that. But I'm not saying that these people are just like unredeemable. They should go out there and get themselves NABCEP certified and redeem themselves and do ethical sales. And I think in the long run, they'll probably do better in life, perhaps even financially.
Yeah, and that's a big part of this course that we are trying to really highlight is the fact that Revision Energy for the last 20 plus years has been building customers for life. And that's through value-based sales. And it's really paid off. I mean, in the solar coaster that we're on, where companies come and go, we're absolutely able to ride those out because we have a foundation of ethics and values that we put forward when we do it. And that really translates into building trust with the customer and also absolutely turning into more contracts signed and more referrals given. So we're able to turn that hard work and those ethics into more money at the end of the day.
So you call it value-based sales. Maybe you can explain what that is a little bit.
Yeah, so a big part of it is just, as a salesperson, embodying honesty, integrity, and transparency. And that can be your own personal sort of morals and moral compass, if you will, but trying to look at it as, treating that person as you would want to be treated. And really looking for the opportunities to educate and to be transparent, to say, hey, I don't know the answer to this, but I'll find out, what this policy means in regards to this, because homeowners, they're educated and they're trying to be informed consumers, and really working with them to, make them a customer for life by working with them, teaching them, and then hopefully that turns into a sale for yourself.
So what's the best way to sell a solar system to like a 90-year-old that has a 40-year return on investment?
Yeah, that's a good question, and probably a question that's better suited for our sales staff who have those sort of tools in their toolbox to be able to say, hey, we have somebody who comes in. But, one of the things is really meeting the customer where they're at. So a good salesperson will be able to find out in an initial conversation with a customer why they're here. If it's because of the environment, if it's for an economic reason, if it's for a legacy, to say, if you're 90 years old, maybe you have grandchildren and you want to leave them a legacy, and say, hey, your grandparents planted this tree at this time, knowing that they would never see the fruit, but you will. So that
Yeah.
is definitely something that they're able to pinpoint and then work with the customer on.
Yeah, I really like legacies. I was thinking about that yesterday. My grandfather, who passed away in 95, the 5 years before he died, he planted, we had people working for him, 150 redwood trees. And I was
Oh,
looking at
wow.
those trees yesterday, and it's amazing. There's like birds and, like it's an ecosystem. It's a forest. He made a forest, and that was a pretty good legacy. And of course, I was joking about the 90-year-old with a 40-year return on investment. But actually, it does make sense that in some cases, somebody might say, this is your inheritance, instead of like maybe they have kids that would just go blow all the money, in Las
Right.
Vegas, speaking of Las Vegas.
Yeah, true, true.
And so you want to leave them something that will like help support them and their grandchildren.
Yeah, and it is a demographic also that you pick out. My father is over 80 and he does not currently have a solar array on his roof, but he does have a good roof line for it. And he gets called or gets a door knocker all the time.
Mm.
And they're looking for that quick sale. They're trying to say, no money down, you can do this, it'll be free, you'll get all this stuff, the government will write you a check, and whatever it is. And my father is, he's a career businessman MBA who was a salesperson himself. And he's like, you're trying to sell me, but I'm not taking the bait, and has reached out to me. Yeah.
I got an idea. It's like, I want to get one of these guys, like sneak up on him and on the podcast. So you just have your dad give him my number, and then we'll do a Zoom call and we'll make it a podcast and we'll expose the people.
It's interesting because, if you're in the industry and you're in sales, or if you're not, if you're just a customer and, you have the potential to do this on your roof, the solar bros, if you will, definitely like to promote what they're doing and almost brag about it. Like that's how they get other people into it to say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you can make, 250K, $500,000 in a year. And there's all this sort of bragging and stuff that goes on, showing them their, all their fancy cars that they have, if that's such a thing. And then at the end of the day, it pulls in a certain person who, might have, I guess, not explored their values or their ethics too much. They're looking at the bottom line saying, hey, I want to make a quick buck. This might be a sales only organization as opposed to one that also installs and services the array. They might just be there to get the contract signed and then it's all subbed out from there, which, causes its own set of issues.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that they made them do in Nevada based on this law that this senator was supporting was to make sure that the people that were selling were attached to a contractor's license. And they just weren't somebody out there, generating leads that doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm sure you've probably had it happen too, where somebody calls your dad's house or something and you grab the phone and I start asking them questions like, what's the difference of power and energy? And they don't even know that, like.
Right. Right. And that's, I think, something, Revision Energy on our website, we've put out a bunch of resources for homeowners to utilize and to say, if you go with Revision Energy, that's great. But really what we want is, do we want more people to adopt clean energy and solar and do that? But we also are letting homeowners know that here's some of the questions you should ask and some of the things so you can make an informed decision and do those pieces. And I think that that's, we're trying to educate the general population, but then you flip the script with like the Revision Energy Training Center. We're also trying to educate the industry. And that's one of the big pieces that we're trying to promote in this course is, a clean energy salesperson should really try to become an expert in all aspects of solar and the products that they're selling, in the policies that they're speaking about, and the financial returns that, a homeowner is going to see from it. And that's something that clean energy salesperson can also really push their company, if that's who they're working for, to say, hey, do you have a professional development budget? Like, how are you going to invest in me to be able to make sure that I'm selling a product that I can be proud of and stand behind?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. You were talking more about Revision Energy. Maybe we could just talk about Revision Energy too.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely.
like what your role is, and you are the apprenticeship coordinator of Revision Energy. And also, Revision Energy, like HeatSpring, is a B Corp, and Revision Energy is an employee owned company. So that sounds pretty cool. So that means, I guess, you're an owner?
Yes, the employees of Revision Energy are all co-owners, and the company's been in operation for over 20 years. Got its start in Maine in the US, and then has expanded to, we have offices in New Hampshire, and we operate in Massachusetts as well. And a number of years ago, I'd say 6 or 7 years ago, we saw a need to train an electrician workforce. And that's where this idea for apprenticeship programs came in, because traditionally, you can apprentice in the trades. And we created the Revision Energy Electrician Apprentice Program. It's called REAP. And that has then expanded. We now have 5 registered apprenticeship programs.
Wow.
So we have the electrician program, which is about 2/3 of our apprentices. And then we have a manager apprenticeship program. We have a solar design, a solar sales, technical sales, and a customer service apprenticeship program. And the last 2 are the ones that I run.
Wow, that is really awesome.
Yeah, we've got a staff of 7 now, and we work primarily, it's people who we hire at the company, and then we put them through this apprenticeship program. And the apprenticeships, like the 2 that I work on and have helped develop, lean heavily on third-party training companies like Solar Energy International, as well as HeatSpring, for the courses that they will take. And a few of your courses that you've offered on HeatSpring are incorporated into specifically the commercial portion of the technical sales apprenticeship program. And at the end, the apprenticeships are based off of promoting a certification. So for the electric one, you get your journey person electrician license after 4 years. For the technical sales one, you'll be able to sit for the NABCEP technical sales cert. And then for the customer service one, they're both year-long apprenticeship programs. You'll be able to sit for your PD associate through NABCEP.
Great. Awesome. So you said there's 7 on staff. Is that the trainers, not the apprentices, but...
No. We've got about 80 apprentices right now who we're working with, but the team consists of a number of apprenticeship coordinators. So I'm not the only one. I'm one of 4. And then we have a master electrician on our team who is part of the training team. We have an administrative person who helps with a lot of the registered apprenticeship piece, because there's a number of hoops that we have to jump through with the state and at the federal level to make sure that they're registered apprenticeships. And then we have our director who's leading the charge. And Bree has put together a fantastic team of employees that are really dedicated, educators. And our crew is very passionate about continuing adult ed and making sure that people are able to, get the skills that they need to be successful in their career and for the company and for the industry and really for the planet.
Great. And how big is Revision Energy? How many people own Revision and work there?
Right. So right now we've got just over 450 employees.
Wow.
And like I said, we've got 6 offices that's in the tri-state sort of northern New England area of New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts.
Wow, that's pretty good. And I imagine there's probably a lot of people that would want to work there. Are there job openings and things like that often?
There are. So our career page is very active. We are always hiring electricians. So if people are interested or have those credentials, that's absolutely an opportunity here. And then throughout, the year, we have a great HR team that is open to both current active applications and filling those roles, and then also people who are just interested to reach out and learn more about the opportunities to be, work with the Revision Energy team.
So how does Revision Energy find salespeople?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact sort of process for it, but, a lot of people when we are hiring, are coming from a customer service background. They either have experience in sales directly. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have clean energy sales, because obviously there's a lot of people who are getting inspired to move into the clean energy world. That was sort of my background, having sort of a second act, if you will, and saying, hey, I did something for quite some time and I really wanted to get into helping being part of the solution around climate change. So threw my hat in the ring. I know that when I was hired on, I found a position I wanted to be in learning and development. And, doing training and education programs, and I saw this opportunity as an apprenticeship coordinator and jumped on it.
So, as far as apprenticeship programs go, I know that the Inflation Reduction Act had some benefits for making an apprenticeship program. Did that kind of inspire Revision to make an apprenticeship program, or did you already have one before that?
I believe it inspired us to expand it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's opportunities there. I definitely know the IRA had provisions around apprentices being part of discounts for, actually having labor. So that would be the electrical apprenticeships that would allow them to, get tax breaks or reductions in the cost of installing a system if those people were on site and they could be documented.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And do you know, is that still happening? I mean, I guess it's day to day, so tomorrow might be a different story than today, and we're not going to release this immediately. So
right. As of today, yes, it still is a thing. And, our apprenticeship programs are definitely growing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I've seen or I kind of thought about with solar sales and ethics and all that is it seems like some of the bigger companies have had some trouble, reading some articles about that and also having financial troubles and things like that. And also those big companies are helping finance the big lobbying groups in the solar industry. So it almost seems like it could be a conflict of interest. And I don't know if you want to comment on that or not, but it's just something that it's a question.
It's an astute observation. And I don't have the facts to really comment completely on that, but it does beg the question and make you scratch your head to say, if these are the people causing the issues and then they are the ones who are helping support or fund and things like that, it makes you wonder how that pans out from an ethical and, value-based standpoint.
Yeah.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Shawn White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his HeatSpring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
I remember one time, this is probably like 8 or 10 years ago, and I do training, and people hire me, and sometimes unethical people hire me. And I figure that, I don't know if they're unethical off the bat anyway, but even unethical people will probably be better if they know what they're talking about.
Right.
And so these people hired me to go down to Laguna Beach and do some training from their people. And I thought that was kind of neat. But it ended up, I was going around in this car with this guy named Mitch, and he was chain smoking, and he just had me drive, and he's yelling at salespeople with his little headset, telling them how to talk to the customer. And it's like, I better get out of here.
It's interesting, and I'm sure you have, stories or have heard stories over the years, and myself included. In a prior role, I definitely was able to sort of be a fly on the wall to some decision making that, I definitely questioned and sort of wondered about to say, what is this founded in? Is it just founded in closing the sale and making the quick buck? And that's where I think companies get in trouble is, especially if for some of these bigger sales organizations, if they're just a sales only group and they sub out everything else, or, it's also how they compensate their sales team. So if a sales team is commission-based, 100% commission-based, that company hasn't really invested in you at all. And in fact, you are then put in these ethical situations where you're like, do I want to eat and pay the mortgage? Or if I have a family, I have to close sales to feed them. So you're put in this situation that is very challenging.
Yeah, and a lot of times they're young people.
Right. And are swept up in that energy around, hey, look at me, we're part of this group. We're going to close these sales. We're going to make a bunch of money. You're going to be high rolling and all this stuff. And, at the end of the day, you really have to question that and hopefully, make the right decisions for the long term of the customer and the company.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're telling each other that they're saving the planet while they're doing that.
Right,
Mm,
right.
mm.
And it's a challenge because then, you go back and you see these customers who they've, either didn't have a good roof line for it, or for whatever reason, the system isn't operating as intended or as promised, but they're nowhere to be found in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. The disappearing companies and all that kind of stuff, or corporation handing off assets and, corporations go broke and then they just start a new business and there's all kinds of tricks that people can do.
Right, right.
And so, have you heard some bad stories, I guess, probably?
It was interesting putting this course together. We interviewed a number of very seasoned sales professionals. So on our team, Janice DePietro is our chief customer officer. And then she has a long history of working in the clean energy world, and was part of Sunbug Solar, which was acquired by Revision Energy just a couple years ago. And she had, some great sort of anecdotes, but also experience to be able to, put weight behind these things that she's learned over her career, and then be able to say, we've stumbled or we've seen this, and don't do what, we did or what we've seen done. Ben Mayer is another one who was interviewed, and he came from Sunbug Solar and is now part of Revision Energy as our head of customer experience. We had Kevin Koch from Technicians for Sustainability, who he was introduced to us through the Amicus buyers group, who we're a part of. And Kevin had some experience is with his company where he's seen in the Tucson area, companies come and go over the years, and he's set up his company so that it has been successful over the years. Myself, I was with Pika Energy, which was a local manufacturer here in Maine. And then we were acquired by Generac.
Great. So you were there for the transition.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. So I was part of that team and moved from sort of a manufacturing role into an inside sales role when we were acquired. And, we didn't sell direct to consumers, but we did sell to distributors and to installers, and getting to know installers. And this was me cutting my teeth in the, clean energy world. And during that time, I sought out further education. So I used some professional development money. I went and took some courses with SEI, and then I went and got NABCEP, my PV associate, which was fantastic. Your practice exam for the PVA came in super helpful for when I was sitting down to take that exam. And
Thanks.
yeah, you're welcome. It was definitely, the work that you've done over the years has been tremendous and a huge, huge boost to the industry. And, I think, like I said, that is a key part of getting past a lot of ethical dilemmas, is really being able to understand what you're talking about. Because prior to that time, I was learning all about energy storage specifically, and it is ever evolving. There's so much technical stuff. And thankfully, I can sort of hold my own, but taking a course and actually getting the education really allowed me to speak to, business owners. Those are the installers who are, either master electricians and contractors who have been doing this work for quite some time, to be able to pass that knowledge and educate them on it. But, we also saw companies come through that had different motives. They were, wanted to make sales. And if they really learned and understood the product, we did as much as we could to try to educate them.
Great, great, great. So you mentioned Amicus Buyers Group. Maybe you could explain what that is and how people can join the group.
Yeah, I can explain what I know of the Amicus Buyers Group, but they're basically a cooperative. They're a consortium of value-based clean energy companies that pool their resources. Specifically, I think a big benefit of it is to purchase, materials, the supplies that are needed to install clean energy systems and home electrification, with a focus on home electrification. And they're able to buy them at wholesale and at volume discounts. So you probably have to meet some criteria to become a part of the Amicus group. And once you're in, then you have access to this network and the experience that's there. And Revision Energy has been a part of Amicus for a number of years now. And when we were looking for subject matter experts, because we said, it's one thing if it just came from Revision Energy with us saying, hey, we've had success, focusing on value-based sales that, as we've said, build trust and turn into contracts signed and referrals offered. Who else has done that? And what's their perspective? So we dipped into that pool and reached out to the Amicus buyers group and were able to pull in some great experience and some great ideas on how to have value-based or ethics in the sales process.
So that's what value-based means then, is ethics, to be ethical?
Yeah, so ethics, as it's defined, is the moral sort of compass that you use or a group uses to do something, if it's sell, if it's what have you. And then the values are sort of the individual pieces that we're trying to promote and remind people that there's some very simple things that you can embody when you're going into the sales situation. Like we've said, it's being honest, being transparent, having that integrity so that, you're really focusing on educating the customer so that they can make an informed decision and really trust in that decision and trust in you as the salesperson to not steer them wrong.
So the Amicus Buyers Group wants to work with ethical people, I guess you're saying.
That is correct.
I'm wondering if one way of screening for ethical people is you take an infrared camera and you tweak the software a little bit and you see what kind of soul they have. Do you think they do it that way?
I'm sure they have tests like that. And with AI and machine learning, who knows what's going to come down the road. But, there are companies like Revision and the group that Amicus has put together that really, they walk the walk and they talk it as well. And they make sure that, they're like, hey, if you want to be part of this, we have some standards that we want to uphold. And it's sort of not rocket science. At the end of the day, it's sort of trying to not go in there for the quick flash in the pan, I'm going to get out. And it's really, treating yourself and your customers with respect and making sure that they understand that.
Yeah, and then some companies, they can be more on the ethical side and then kind of change. Like I remember I was teaching classes for this company called Solar Universe for maybe 5 years, once a month, something like that. It's been a while. And then it seems to me that a new CEO came in and then just pretty much liquidated it, turned it into a call center, and everything died. And they owe people a whole bunch of money and they went bankrupt pretty much. And so I guess if somebody was like NABCEP certified or an Amicus buyers group or in some kind of organization, and they started losing their ethics due to some kind of business thing happening, perhaps they would get booted. I know that NABCEP reserves the right to kick people out of, make them lose their certification if they're doing something wrong. Even like a contractor's license, when you renew it, there oftentimes is something like a checkbox, like you haven't been convicted of any crime or, things like that.
Right.
Or if you were, they would want to find out what it was, and you might be on, probation or completely lose your rights and things like that. And it's kind of a neat thing too that NABCEP has that. So one of the things that I've done is I'm the president of NorCal Solar, and that's a ACES chapter in California. It's 51 years old. And we had a mission that we grew out of. And so like 50 years ago, the mission was to educate people about solar. Well, it was like taking people to show them what a solar module looks like and, stuff like that. They've never seen one. And we don't really need to do that anymore. And so I have two different things for the new mission. One of them is the anti-solar coaster. So to encourage policymakers when they make changes to make them gradual. And then that would get rid of that solar coaster problem. And then as policies change gradually, then people can make more long-term investments. And then, of course, the next one is what we're talking about is ethical sales. And here's what I put down for what people should do is make sure that their salesperson or just somebody even that works at the company that's involved in the project is NABCEP certified. And they do have a directory of all the people that are NABCEP certified. And that's a good way to make sure they're ethical, because then they could lose their certification. And then look at their contractor's license at their state. You can look over at IREC, that's the Interstate Renewable Energy Council, and you can see, different licensing requirements for different states. And then ask neighbors and people like that have solar what their experience was. And then you can always do those other searches like the Better Business Bureau, Google, and Yelp. But just keep in mind that people can cheat on those things.
Right.
And they could get all their friends or pay somebody to give fake reviews and all that kind of stuff. But if you do see a bunch of bad things, that's probably a pretty good indication, and look at their stars. Like I noticed that your class on HeatSpring is getting 4.8, which is really good. That's what I have for like all my classes averaged out too. And that's a lot of work getting that 4.8 stars. And then give the salesperson a little quiz, just like I was saying, like, what's the difference between power and energy? And another thing is, what's a demand charge? Like they can't offset demand charges with solar alone. They need storage and things like that. And then other questions that they can ask people is, what if I sell my house? What's the buyout for that? And remember that every contract is negotiable. How long will it take to install? I've seen a lot of people complaining that they said that it was going to take a week and it took a year. And so what's the consequence if they don't install it when they said they would? And maybe even include interconnection too, not just the install, but like when it's actually connected to the grid. And what happens if after the job starts, they start trying to charge you more for things? I've seen that because just like maybe the salesperson didn't understand that it was going to need some, supply side connection or a panel change or something like that. And then what about replacing the roof? What's going to happen if the roof needs to be replaced in 5 years? Are they going to come and take the system off? And what if they say they are and they don't? What's the penalty for that? And who's responsible for maintenance and lots of things like that?
Yeah, those are all really good questions for, especially homeowners to consider as they're considering getting solar. You were talking about referrals and customers doing their homework to make sure that they're working with a reputable company. And I think that a lot of people will, who do you turn to first if you're going to make a giant financial investment like what solar and, electrifying your home can be? A lot of times you'll turn to a trusted advisor or somebody in your local community who you can maybe have a face-to-face conversation with if needed, or at least get them on the phone. And they're a human who says, yes, I worked with company X and they were absolutely fantastic. But to be able to have those referrals and have those, as we call them at Revision, solar champions, people who are all in, they had a fantastic experience from first touch to, permission to operate. And they're willing to step up to bat to say, hey, these people were great. Their sales team were great, their customer experience team. And now if I have an issue or a question, I can call up the service department and ask about that. So that referral process and making sure those customers are well taken care of throughout the whole entire sales process to install to service the life of the system is very, very important. And that starts with having those first touches when they're working with the salespeople who are educated. And if they have a NABCEP certification or have gone their own route and taken enough courses where they can build that trust with the customer, I think that that's very, very important. I do think you also talked about companies that maybe have a shift in their values or their focus, and maybe they get bought and they change. I mean, that is one of the reasons that is a big selling point, especially for employee ownership, because as an owner, we have say in, who's gonna, if someone's gonna come in and purchase the company, and do they hold the values that we hold as employee owners? So, we have to make a decision as a group that really can thwart off that sort of piece where somebody might swoop in a well-known brand that has a great reputation within the community, is then snatched up, and all of a sudden the reputation starts to slide off because the new owners don't. Ben Mayer was talking about, in New England, we have companies that are over 100 years old. You always see the trucks driving around. It's so-and-so's electrical started in 1920 or something along those lines. And we really hope that Revision Energy and other companies, as the solar industry grows and matures, that there are those companies that have since 1980, since 1990, since 2000, that they have those, that legacy, and they're able to push that out. And then also, I was going to mention about the NABCEP course that we offered. The two things I'd like to definitely remind people of is the course is free. So it's an hour-long course. It is an introduction.
And that's your ethical sales
Yeah,
course.
to ethics in solar sales. It's a free course. So, it's about 60 minutes total time, and it's some videos that you have to watch. You get to see yours truly, myself. I'll be up there. We have a couple other.
With a beard. Yep.
Yes, yes. So this is the spring Rob look. I joke, my kids ask me every fall to grow a beard, and I'm like, this year I'll do it. It's usually the fall equinox to the spring equinox, and then I'm ready for summer mode. And, you can get CEUs as well.
Great.
So you can get one NABCEP CEU. It's been approved for that. So, it's definitely something that we encourage anybody in the sales organization, anyone who's sort of part of the customer acquisition process, to take. So that would be salespeople, that would be leadership. That's both in the residential and commercial side, to be able to sit down and to take this course. And to just really, I think it creates a lot of questions as well, and makes people sort of really look inside to say, hey, am I in the right company? Am I in the right position? Am I able to make the right, decisions ethically when it matters the most? And we hope to give people the tools from the little bit that we've gleaned from our experience and from the other subject matter experts who we interviewed and put this course together. So it's definitely been a fantastic experience, and the wheels are already turning about what's next.
Well, you're not in California, though. That's a problem. I have people calling me up asking me who to refer to. And I've referred to people, and then they get too busy. And it's like, I'm really afraid to refer to people. So pretty much what I've been doing lately is I have a friend that does really good work, and he costs more. And I just tell everybody, this is my friend. He's the only person I'll refer to because I don't want to take responsibility, but he will cost more. And I've had people use him, and they don't ever complain to me, and he's a roofer and an electrician. And I remember this one guy that I was referred some people to, and he was well-intentioned, but he just wasn't good at running a business. And right. 2 years later, I get my friends, but still I feel like it kind of compromised my relationship with some other friends that I referred to this guy, and I just felt terrible. And that was a person that I actually believe has ethical intentions. Let's just say he wasn't trying to smooth talk anyone, but just didn't know how to run a business too well, or just took on more work than he could handle and burned himself out.
Right. Yeah. And I think with that, it's also part of that honesty piece to, if you refer somebody who to a contractor, and that contractor is just, if they're flat out and they're booked out a year, that's part of being honest with that and say, hey, I appreciate the referral, Sean. I'd love to work with you, but I'm not going to be able to touch this for, our schedule right now. We're booking out into the new year or something along those lines. So just making sure, because that is a part of it with this, the last number of years, we've seen a big uptick in the adoption of clean and solar, which is fantastic, but it's also really strapped a lot of people. A lot of people's phones are ringing off the hook, as well as, systems that were installed by people who might have gone out of business, and people need help getting them back online and stuff like that. It can definitely stress the people who are value-based and really focused on ethical sales and ethical, running a business with an ethical standpoint, and making sure that they're able to service everybody who's out there.
Yeah, I get a lot of cold calls from people selling leads, from people selling equipment, all kinds of stuff like that. I get them on LinkedIn, I get them on email, I get them on calls, I get them on texts, I get them on, like this morning I got a WhatsApp one. And I've decided this thing about the last month, instead of getting upset, I will troll them. And so, say something crazy or see if I could rile them up or something, just make fun of them. Because for a while, it's just like, it's wasting my time. These darn lousy people are wasting my time. And, so maybe that's a recommendation to some people is just have fun with it. And I do want to get somebody on the podcast that's like the bad guy and expose them. So just if anybody has any pointers for me.
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, you've been in the industry for years and have seen the ebbs and the flows. And, I was talking about this with some colleagues about sort of we're in this gold rush moment where there was just a lot of funding and support and tax breaks and all kinds of things to come into the industry. And that's going to bring in bad actors who are looking to get rich quick. They know that they can get their money and then get out, and they won't think twice about who it hurts or who it harms. And I think the industry is aware of the challenges we have. And it sounds like from the request to put this course together, there are a lot of people who are working very hard to turn that around and to make sure that we're able to really help as opposed to harm.
Have you ever heard of SolarCon?
SolarCon, I have not.
It's like a convention. It's kind of weird. Like I'm hang out with the NABCEP crew, and the technical people and people that are NABCEP certified. And I go to the big conferences and stuff like that too. But there's this whole other world of like the solar salespeople, and they have their own conference. And it's like completely separate from what we do. And I guess there's this conference called SolarCon. I think it's in Salt Lake City. Maybe they change it at different times. And I just thought maybe what I'll do is I'll go there undercover and see what I can come up with. That would be kind of fun. So I'm going to go look that up. But it is weird that there's just like this whole other world. And I've talked to some of these people too, where like they call up, they want to take my class and get the NABCEP PV technical sales and all that. And they're like, are you going to SolarCon? And I was like, what is that? And they're like, you don't know? And they're like, what about, do you know this guy? Do you know that guy? And so like, there's these sales people that are, giving speeches, wearing suits, talking about how much money they can make. And like these people that are just like, I make $2 million a year knocking on doors and stuff like that. And so maybe I will go out there and I'll have to go check it out. Maybe it'll be fun.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I have not heard of that conference, but I will definitely look into it and to see if there's an opportunity to teach them some ethics in solar sales.
Yeah, so it's not a con. Yeah, and it's just like when people are doing this kind of thing, it's hurting the whole industry. So in the short term, somebody's making some money, all that kind of stuff. Somebody's getting some solar, all that kind of stuff. But in the long term, it's giving the industry a black eye. It's making people not buy solar. It's like hard for people to know who to buy it from. And solar is getting more complicated because we don't get credit for exporting and you have to calculate, how it's going to work with batteries. And then if you do go out there and get 3 different proposals in a place like where I live, where you don't get much credit for exporting, you're going to get 3 proposals that are probably considerably different. One of them might have twice as many batteries and the other one has twice as much solar. And they might actually both be good because, twice as many batteries or twice as much solar. I mean, it depends. You might get to the same place. There might be some kind of crossover there. It's just not cut and dry. It never was, but it's even a little bit more confusing with things like that. And then you have demand charges, you have different rates all over the place. When we were talking earlier, I was thinking like, well, one thing that a person could do is go out there and get 3 proposals and then go to the NABCEP website, find somebody in a different state that's not competing with those people, like maybe on the other side of the country, and hire them, give them a few $100 to look at those proposals. And it might be well spent money, except the problem with that too is the incentives on the other side of the country are going to be a lot different.
Yeah, it is a very sound consideration as far as how you get sort of a third party independent group. If it's a sales company that's not in competition with that group to review them, or if it's some sort of state or federal agency to say, all right, you've got this proposal, now, send it to us and we'll give it the once over and review it and say, this is valid or this is not worth it. And one of the things, with that I've seen, and I know that the sales team with Revision is, we encourage our customers to go out and get a few quotes. It's definitely a very big investment. You should absolutely do that. And we're happy to review other people's quotes in a sense to say, hey, here's some things you should consider or questions you should ask that installer, because although the proposal might have a different bill of materials or a different, it half as many panels or it has twice as many panels, but they missed fire setbacks on the roof because they're brand new or something along those lines, to be able to just sort of bring those to light in front of a customer, to be able to say, I think that would increase your trust that you're building in that customer, to be able to even do it within the industry, because we don't have a third party to do it yet, how we police ourselves in a sense.
Great, great. Yeah, and I did recently talk to somebody on the podcast from Energy Sage too. So
nice.
People might also want to listen to that. And they're an organization where you can go and find different installers that they have qualified. So the idea is that they will screen out any evil. Yeah.
As best they can, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I truly feel like there's a lot of really good people in the industry that are working very hard. And at the moment, there's a lot of moving targets with policy changes and, at the federal and state level, and keeping on top of those. We're all working hard to do it as best we can. Unfortunately, these bad actors definitely can grab news headlines when they get caught for doing something that isn't honest.
Yeah, and as an industry, we should jump on those people too when they do that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So we don't get blamed for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's expose them. So let's see, is there any other things that we should talk about?
I think we've covered a lot of it, as it relates to this ethics in solar sales course. It's definitely a pleasure being here today and chatting with it. And we definitely want to encourage, anyone who's involved in the sales process at different companies to take it and to consider some of the focuses that we have, which basically is, if you embody an ethical sales process which has values, it is, I think, in the long run, a money maker. It will generate more money. It will sell more solar. It will turn into more referrals. And you're going to be making very happy customers for life. And, yourself as a salesperson, you'll be able to increase your education to be able to be that expert. We definitely would love to see people take the course.
Great. Well, if I was an unethical solar salesperson, you would have just talked me into your course. So, all right. So everybody make sure to check out Rob Mueller's class, and it is called Introduction to Ethics in Solar Sales. It's on HeatSpring. We'll have that link at the top of the show notes. And I've been promoting your class already. I just saw that class came out and I was just like, awesome, we need that. So thanks a lot for being on the podcast too. It was very good to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. It's a pleasure, and keep up the great work that you're doing to educate all of our colleagues in the industry. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
And thank you so much, Rob Mueller, for being on the podcast. And thanks, Revision Energy, for being such a cool B Corp. Like HeatSpring is a B Corp. That's like a benefit corporation. That's like Patagonia. That's just the way to do things. It's really cool. I was actually doing some work for a B Corp in Panama. So B Corps aren't just American. They can be doing things in different places. So yeah, it was really good talking to you, and I hope to see you in person someday. I did a class in Maine one time for Gifford Electric over in Bangor, Maine, and that was pretty nice, except they made me work really long hours. After that class, I was like, we got to keep it down to 8 hours. I think it was like 9.5 hours with a half hour for lunch or something like that.
Oh, wow.
All right.
Well, yeah, if you find yourself in Maine or in the Northeast, definitely be in touch, and I look forward to crossing paths.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks so much for putting up that class, and I hope to see more from you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Take care, Rob.